Alright everyone, just a little bit of a hint here, a warning for anyone who gives a damn, for people who use like Reddit, 4chan, some of these other sites, certainly use Discord servers. Online shilling has definitely begun to pick up prior to the main political season. It's not just the midterms, some of it's, I think, related to the Brazilian election, where Bolsonaro, by the way, he won easily in the first round, but came in just shy of where he needed to be to win on the second. But because he was a couple points ahead, I'll talk about this, this will be the big video of the day, because he was a couple points ahead of expectations, he probably wins the second round with no problem, which means he's probably the next leader of Brazil. Brazil is going to elect Donald Trump Jr. for Brazil. It's going to be great for them. Look, they adopt those economic policies, more power to them. They'll become the main player within the region. They probably will leave BRICS, which would, tear up the Eastern Alliance. That'd be funny. Watch China lose access to some of those farm goods. That'd be a good thing. Definitely strengthen the Americas if we're trading with Brazil locally and repairing relations. But with regards to shilling, there are several things to watch for. Like right now, what sparked this video is this morning, I go on 4chan. I go on Politically Incorrect in the mornings usually, because sometimes you can get good news tips. Unfortunately, it's currently a cesspit of people porn posting and talking about like, it's only red-pilled if you impregnate women, and then some of the MGTOW stuff and things like that. Most of these are not good faith threads. They're not being posted by people who actually believe it. It's meant to derail other topics. So literally, I'm looking for like, the fourth news story of the day, and the news story of the day ends up being the shilling that's going on there. And I'm not saying that it's all non-organic. It's an interesting thing that happens. If you're shit posting enough of a certain type of thread, like, oh, I hate X, or Y is bad because, or hey, what do you think about insert, emotionally charged recent issue here, eventually other people will then organically take it and start spreading it. And so, once you warn people, hey, some of this is shilling, they'll say, no, I'm not doing that. You're paranoid, basically. It's a conspiracy theory. But it wasn't organic, the reason why you think it's an interesting subject. It's sort of a non-organic, it's sort of like a forest fire. A forest fire continues to burn. You don't have to keep lighting new matches to keep it burning. It's organic at that point. But somebody started the fire. It's a whole thing. And it starts a mini movement. It's very funny. It happens frequently on Politically Incorrect because this was identified openly as like one of the evil alt-right places of the internet. So we have to do something. Said like Share Blue, Media Matters, Open Society Foundation. Yes, they do pay shills to post. It is something that happens. It's not all left-wing, by the way. It tends to be authoritarian groups. Some of them lean to the right. The Federalist or some think tank on the far right, the Cato Institute, could pay shills if it wanted. Probably do. They conduct lots of op research. Why wouldn't they be studying memes? If the U.S. military has like a mimetic warfare studies at this point, yeah, politically active groups certainly do. But I've been noticing it more. It's also aimed at personalities within the alt media, and here's the key. Like if you go to Politically Incorrect, think about it this way. The establishment says that it's like far right. It's basically, it's like an identitarian hellhole and stuff. They say this about Gab and other sites too. And yet when you go there, anytime that there's mention of the alternative media, it's almost always an attack upon some figure within the alternative media. This does not sync up with the illusion, the propagandistically fed illusion that 4chan should be attacked and deplatformed because it's filled with Nazis or something. It really doesn't. There's a reason for that disconnect. It's because of shilling. Specifically, it's not like a far-right site, but the disproportionality in those threads that are made is the result of the fact that they are primordial made in a non-organic nature. Again, it's not, it's not all shills doing this. Sometimes it's like literally like, someone's not a fan of mine or Malnu or whoever it happens to be. They hate Lauren Southern for some reason. They have a stick up their ass about Razor Fist, and so they're basically shitting it up about them. That definitely happens. But sometimes it's not. It's an attempt to weaken the alternative media. Specifically, the Data Society report mentioned this. It's very important. You've got to understand this. They said, well, there's more of a familial relationship, more bonding happens between alternative commentators. Now, they say like, reactionaries, far-right YouTubers or whatever the case may be. They would say there's more of a bond between these people and their audience than you would get from like Maddow or Shepard Smith or something. Someone who's primarily on TV, disconnected, not interacting with the audience in any meaningful way, like maybe a tweet now and then, but mostly not. Those people are at a disadvantage from the sort of audience style that happens in the alt media. We're more approachable. That is, like, I don't sit here in $1 million studio and ignore the rest of humanity, collect my paycheck and blow it on coke every day like some pundit at Fox News might do. And so they seek to weaken that perceived bond, which isn't even entirely there, by the way. In some cases, it's like, you do realize just because someone subscribes to you doesn't mean they're, like, fawning over you. So I think sometimes people get a big dick about it. It's very funny, and it's like, it's not the way the world works. It's like, I subscribe to people, it doesn't mean that I worship them. That's the perception. The Data Society and other shill groups are worried about this. And remember, they're literally tied to the Open Society Foundation. They're literally being crafted by Microsoft, Silicon Valley tech firm, in order to conduct these studies, which are so fatally flawed. It's like, how can a Microsoft offshoot be so unconcerned with reality? It's not how Bill Gates became wealthy. He didn't become wealthy by ignoring the reality around him. He had to notice that in order to make all his money. Now I guess pretends that there's no problem. But a lot of this is non-organic. A lot of it is taking place because some group like ShareBlue wants to weaken the bond between audience and creator. It doesn't have to be YouTube, it's other platforms as well. The idea is to limit their message. It's a similar counterpart to preemptive propaganda about them. So you see preemptively, even users that don't have extremely large audiences, they get like sniped at and defamed by, like even the Wall Street Journal or BuzzFeed or something will come out to include them in a naughty list of some sort. The reason for doing this, even if they've got technically a smaller side audience, is quite clear. It's to prevent them from growing further. They're preventing to stop the proliferation of the alt media. They're largely failing, but it's an attempt. This kind of shilling is just another offshoot of that same long-term effort. It's been going on for several years. It started before the 2016 election ended. There was a time there that it was a non-stop flood, a non-stop cavalcade of threads being shitposted about e-celebrities, so they called them. Some of the people that were mentioned did not have particularly large audiences, and almost every single one of them was anti-left. They was specifically anti-censorship and involved in some meaningful way with alternative news discourse, current events, or alt-tech. That's the criterion that were used to judge whether these people should be targeted. People who didn't, even if they were far-right commentators, never got mentioned in a negative light. There's a reason for that, because they're not a threat to the establishment. There's no reason to attack them. They're already in an echo chamber. So they're trying to create those echo chambers now for people by labeling them like by labeling you far right, for example. Let's say a commentator is like a routine garden variety MAGA populist. They're not on the far right. They're just like, hey, I want, more money for Americans. It's not an out there view. It's a commonly held view even in the left. By calling them far-right, you organically will attract far-right individuals to them that weren't part of their audience, really, in any meaningful way. They begin to, in some cases, adopt those views. Like, their resistance to doing so, because they may be making a living doing what they're doing, they're going to basically pussyfoot around certain issues and not going to talk about them. They'll play up to their perceived now far-right audience, or it causes them to defensively align with them, at least in part, because they perceive an attack coming from the left. Now it is, obviously. It's coming from the globalists, from the multi-culty sort of side, the social justice warriors. But think about who actually runs these groups. In closing, I'll say this. Who runs these groups? Naomi Ocasio-Cortez? Bernie Sanders fan? Somebody who lives in a commune? No, it's run by millionaires and billionaires. It's run by big corporations that are in bed with corporate media. That's who they're seeking to defend. And the political establishment. These are all like really super rich corporate people. These aren't like hippies. Some pink hat wearer is just a pawn of the same establishment that they claim to fight. So it's really, really funny to see. But as for the shilling, it's like counter-propaganda starts with awareness. You have to understand that it's actually happening before you can do anything about it. I'm kind of like, unfortunate, good fucking luck, because, anonymous posting, what are you going to do about it? But realizing that it may be specifically off-topic or distracting on purpose, or specifically defamatory on purpose, always a good thing. And by the way, in actual closing, I would say, yeah, I do expect that there will be like threads about this now probably put up, usually again in bad faith, saying that it's paranoid or that it's wrong in some way. I fully expect that because it's what's happened before when I've tried to warn people about Shilling. And I'm not saying it's just 4chan, it's like Reddit too. Although they've crushed so many of their subreddits out, it's like, who fucking cares at this point? Hell, maybe that's what the problem is. So many people that are like native to Reddit have flocked there or something. Could be. That's about all. Peace out.